welcome everybody to the book launch, The Vibrant Centre Launch, an Existential Consciousness for Our Divided Times by Kirk Schneider. And Kirk, I think we're going to begin with some introductory comments from you about the book, the process of the book, and
Yes.
over to you, Kirk. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you deeply, John, and our distinguished panel of colleagues and friends. I'm very thrilled to have you along with this journey we're on together, and certainly our audience. It's beautiful to see you all, and I very much look forward to a communal inquiry here on a topic that is obviously fraught with challenges, but also in good Taoist fashion, opportunities, I would say, as well. So I want to start off, I'm just going to give you an overview of some key points of the book. But in that light, I wanted to start off with some thoughts about my country's 250th anniversary. That has really been weighing on me of late. What does this mean? What does the 250th anniversary bring up for you all? Now, for me, it brings up, I think, a common problem, major problem that I'm going to get to momentarily. Now, I've long recognized and wrote about this extensively in The Polarized Mind, long recognized that power centers throughout history have based their leadership on preset dogmas, on royal bloodlines, on reactive tyrannies, biblical doctrine, etc. Now, to some degree, this has often been true in my view of so-called liberation movements through history. It's particularly those that threw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And I'm thinking of the French Terror, French Revolution. Obviously, these revolutions had some very important intentions in overthrowing the oppressors of their times. But I think it's important for us to think about some of the dogmatic elements that drove these liberationist movements. So we end up with the French Terror, with Stalinist Russia, with Maoist China, and there are a number of other examples throughout history that I'd like us to be aware of as we move along in this inquiry. Now, for me, the U.S. presents a particular bewilderment because the U.S. was not based on a preset dogma, it seems to me. At least the founding spirit, and I am talking about the aspiration, was based on what I'd call a deliberative evolving idea. A deliberative evolving idea. That's different than a preset dogma, a set of biblical doctrines, reactive tyranny, although clearly there were elements of all of those. But I would say that there was, at least in the core of this spirit, a presence basis, more of a presence basis as distinct from a reactive or a fear-based dimension. This idea, this kernel that all people are created equal with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, of course, these are all subject to interpretation. But it seems to me that this is a rare idea to start a nation in our world. But how could a country that sets itself on that deliberative evolving ideal, an idea, also be responsible for the virtual genocide of its native people, for treating people as chattel slaves from Africa, for the degradation of women and minorities, as basically treating them as second-class citizens, for its extreme classism that we see manifested throughout our country's history, right up to contemporary times. How could we almost totally flip the ideal of freedom and equality, flip it on its head in some of the most egregious, destructive ways possible, such that the Nazis, some in the Nazi Party, actually emulated some of our methodologies of the treatment of people that I just mentioned. And yet we have this Declaration of Independence, a Constitution, and a Bill of Rights. So this presents a tremendous conundrum, it seems to me, that just is mind-spinning. It's I've been struggling with this. I know many, if not most of you, have struggled with this extreme contradiction in our character. But I think it's saying something not just about the U.S. I think it's really saying something about the world. And what I think it's saying is that we're in over our heads, and that we've been in over our heads for a very long time. For those who have attempted to start such presence-based evolving ideas as a basis for a democratic republic, let's say. And that's the reason that there are so few examples of such a community, such a nation. We had this brief example in Athens in ancient Greece, which didn't last all that long. But it was very different from what America tried to begin. First of all, it was quite homogeneous, involved basically a bunch of white men, males, if you could call them white. I realize these terms are very, flimsy, but for the purpose of trying to set the context here, I'm using some of these. So it's a very different situation, and it didn't last all that long. This basis for a mass movement, a mass community of a very diverse population is rare for a reason. And it's come home to me more and more why it's rare as I've studied history and as I think about the swings in our country. and not only in our country, but in the world. It seems to me that many of us are running scared, that actually a more centered view, and I'm not talking about a compliant, a mundane kind of centrism. I'm not talking about a centrism that enables oppression per se. I'm talking about a conscious, dynamic pivot point of centrism, a point of being able to survey the many possibilities before us, and not just intellectually or behaviorally, but with our whole body awareness. And from there, make our moral and ethical choices. That's a rare thing. There's been a lot of superficial centeredness and middle ground, which unfortunately, as people like Dr. King have mentioned, have been accomplices to some degree in the kind of tyranny and extremism where we've suffered. But rare is the nation, the group that centers itself in this, I would say, existential way, because it does have an existential philosophical tradition as well. Rollo May has certainly spoken to this. Now, Albert Camus, I think, made a very strong pitch for this kind of centrism. He called it moderation, but I would strongly object to the notion that he was a moderate in that conventional sense. In his book, The Rebel, he's very clear that his view of moderation is radical, that we have rarely attempted the kind of dynamic, conscious moderation that he is calling for in The Rebel. And he makes the argument that the more enduring and substantive rebellions have occurred on the basis of this greater consciousness, this more whole-bodied awareness of the possible consequences of one's transformation, of attunement to the degree possible to the dignity of the human being, and attempting to see beyond stereotypes and reactivities, that these are the kinds of revolutions that endure more and are more for the betterment of humankind. That's radical. Think about it. What we've mostly had is rigidity, dogma, tyranny, extreme hierarchies, or just plain superficiality and complacency. I think that's a pretty fair reading of the history, and certainly of power centers throughout the history of this world. I mean, since the beginning of recorded time in my own studies. So, and this is a worldwide problem, it seems to me. It's not confined to one party or one nation per se. We've seen it throughout organized cultures continually. And I think that has a lot to do with a very primal fear that likely all of us share, but some of us are afforded ways to deal with it because of our parenting, because of the culture that we, or subculture that we emerge from. Unfortunately, too often cultures and parents don't address this very primal fear, and that is the fear of the radically unknown. You could call it an anxiety. It's a basic existential anxiety that I think we all share from the beginning of being ejected from relative safety, unity to the lack of control and chaos of life, what we're thrown into. And if we don't have parents or cultures that meet us from those early points and ongoingly, I think we suffer consequences like the kind of polarization and extremism that we so often see in our world. This may have been particularly true of industrialized cultures because our focus has been more on the our external lives, making things look good and actually improving many of our external circumstances, raising the standard of living for many of us, preventing diseases, etc. But we've really lagged behind in addressing the deeper inner struggles of people. And in particular, I think this primal terror of the unknown, of that which is different and other, and also I think a very primal curiosity and wonder that soon emerges after this shock and terror of coming into the world. We don't nurture that very well either, in general, at least in the contemporary world. And in so doing, I do believe that this basic sense of groundlessness and helplessness haunts us and is the basis for doing everything we can to cover it up, to avoid any hint of that extreme vulnerability, and therefore how it manifests in the most destructive ways is in extreme militarism, in grandiosity, in making the other feel even lower so that one can raise oneself up and feel even higher and further away from one's core wounds and core vulnerability, because we never developed the skills to work with that. And what we have are perfect storms of leaders who never developed those skills. And by those skills, I basically mean capacity to be more present to one's whole body experience. And we have cultures. We have throngs of people who never were exposed to that kind of internal connecting and the discovery of how to hold the contrasts and contradictions within ourselves, how to hold the radically uncertain and that which is foreign and different. And not only hold it, but to actually evolve in it, to discover and to experience the exhilaration of that holding. And that, what I call a reoccupation project of one's whole bodily being. And this is a lot of what we do, of course, in existential in-depth psychotherapy. We're trying to help people to reoccupy or re-inhabit the contrasting and contradictory parts of themselves that they've blocked off, which have so much to do with a sense of groundlessness and helplessness that has not been met and worked with support and understanding. It's basically been met with fears and prejudices and transmitted traumas that have very long and deep roots. So, I like Camus' idea of radical moderation. I don't particularly like the word moderation. That's why I like vibrant center much more. I think, vibrant center
Kirk, I'm
brings up.
just
Oh,
oh, I'm just thinking about the time and
I'm
getting
sorry.
close to
Yeah,
well, thinking about the panel as well. But sorry to interrupt you, Kirk. I'm just
no,
wonder what you're thinking. And
that's okay. I think you're right. I could get too caught up in the overview. Can I just read the couple of paragraphs at the end of the book,
oh, that would be lovely, Kirk. Yes,
and
please.
then
Thank you.
and we can go into our panel inquiry. We've got to dig deeper. We've got to actively engage with people of all stripes, short of being mortally threatened by them, if we are to make any advances in the mending of our broken worlds. This book is a testament to a dynamic middle ground, a ground of consciousness, choice, and responsiveness, as distinct from drivenness, routine, and reactivity. The onward thrust of technocracy will only intensify this distinction. We will need more consciousness, choice, and responsiveness, more presence, openness, and discernment. Those are the three pillars of the Vibrant Center. More awe for life, humility and wonder, sense of adventure, if we are to manage our devices versus their management of us. We will need enriching environments, enlivening caretakers, the encounter with life's paradoxes, the cultivation of authenticity, active worldliness, and abiding courage to creatively respond to the automation that is increasingly enveloping our lives. And all of those qualities are deeply a part of the lives of the resilient luminaries that I studied from all over the world. These were not luminaries from one particular culture or another, but they all shared those qualities. In the short run, this crisis prods us to increase our live participation in social gatherings, pursue new religious and political leadership, and expose ourselves to people, places, and things that challenge us. It prompts us to think, encourage us to seek more of what matters to us, and gives us ideas about how to live a more gratifying life. In the long run, the crisis presses us to integrate a vibrant, centered, awe-based consciousness in every major sector of our lives, from parenting to education to work setting to religious, spiritual settings to governance. Our task is formidable, but as attested to in this book, doable. The seeds have been planted, and the seeds and planters are here. Now we need to mobilize them and mobilize ourselves. That's where I'll end, right here, with
Thank you,
that
Kirk.
taste of the book. And thanks for the prompt, John.
Oh, when I was reading those words earlier today, deeply inspirational, Kirk. Thank you. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so much to see here. So let's welcome the panel to the screen. And Wesley, thank you for kind of just taking care of that. So Nathaniel Granger, Emmy van Deurzen, Alfried Längle, Nisha Gupta, warm welcome to the event and the panel here. We are going to spend the next hour in the inquiry, I guess. Each of you have been thinking about the book and preparing some responses for Kirk. I'm just, well, we, and maybe deliberately didn't choose who would go first. So I wonder who might be moved first to with a response for Kirk. Um,
I
to
would
get
love
our
to.
Nisha, will you go first? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Kirk, for this extraordinary vision. The thing that I've been caring most about right now at this current time in history is suicide prevention, particularly people with minoritized identities that are finding our society and world too unlivable to remain inside. And what I find to be the most important task of possibly psychologists is to balance social critique with creative imagination in order to offset despair with hope. And so this incredible book is, I believe, a gesture of saving lives. I really do see it that way, and I hearken to Rollo May in The Courage to Create. He wrote, "There is profound joy in the realization we are helping to form the structure of the new world. This is creative courage, however minor or fortuitous our creations may be." And so just thank you for your creative courage. It is an example of what we all need to be doing and empowering ourselves to imagine. And with that, I found your vision so inspiring. As like a transpersonal depth psychologist myself, awe-based consciousness is so accessible. I see that in the death happening right now, there is a rebirth into the possibility of rebirth into a more sacred consciousness. However, I want to engage the part of you that really talks about paradoxes here and the depth psychologist in you there, because I've been reading Thomas More a lot as a depth psychologist, and he will talk about the difference between the spirit that soars high and the soul that digs down into the roots. And when I think about a society built on awe-based consciousness, it's so inspiring. It soars so high. And yet, the soul lives in the shadows at times. And the soul carries grief and anger and pain and hurt and even hatred at times. And as we know, Jung and Hillman and more, we're all careful to make sure we do not disavow the shadow individually and collectively. And I wonder if you can speak to how we can personally and collectively honor, be present to the shadows of humanity. And I'd love to hear your response theoretically and pragmatically, like what interventions do this at the collective.
No, much appreciate your reflection and question, Nisha. Yes, well, one of the cores of the book is how do we practically address these huge challenges? And, we write about what we're familiar with, and what I'm most familiar with and very energized by these days is this project that Tyler Gamlin and I co-founded called the Core of Depth Healers. And the Core of Depth Healers is for those of us in particular in the helping professions who are concerned about and interested in applying depth principles of practice to social crises, and in particular in fostering or making available, that's huge, making available what we call emotionally restorative relationships. Relationships where people feel heard and seen and that get at the roots of their problems. And so we have a whole curriculum for people in the helping profession to survey video samples and articles by leaders who have attempted to apply depth principles of practice to social issues. And then the main part of the program, called the Core of Depth Healers.com, that's the website, The main part of the program is where people home in on a particular emphasis that resonates with their expertise, their context or community, so that they can hone these learnings through the course and apply them in their own communities. And the emphases are like 11 different emphases, but they basically address parental and family systems, the educational, school setting, how we can bring a more vibrant, centered, emotionally restorative, bridge building relationship to that setting, work setting, organizational settings, religious and spiritual settings, and governance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very wide swath, but so that is one practical. I think we need more of these kinds of practical grassroots programs. We're now in our fourth cohort, and it seems to be engaging folks and energizing them. We need more of those. And I also propose in the book, and this is pretty out there, but I think it's absolutely necessary. We need an equivalent to the Surgeon General in our country, who mainly presides over a kind of medicalized model of health, as well as some of the other government organizations. We need an Office of Psychological Advisors to bring much more of a psycho-spiritual attunement to our country and to our governance as well. So that's a whole area that I won't get into the weeds about too much, but I've proposed some ideas like a pre-legislative protocol where legislators I probably need to be required as part of the legislative process to engage in one of the supportive structured dialogues that have been shown to be successful, like Braver Angels or the Experiential Democracy Dialogue, prior to any formal legislative process. So at least we know they've exposed themselves to some quite intimate ways of relating, at least more of a chance of engaging in a humanizing conversation as opposed to reactive, rhetorical, stereotype conversation with the other side. So those are some ideas, but yes, please bring on more. And I know you're bringing more to the fore in your writing as well, Nisha. So private sector and the federal sector need to join more.
Nathaniel, I can see you've got your poised to respond. Am I catching that right? Yeah.
Yes. I have to admit, when I first, Kirk, when you first approached me about the book, when I saw the title, The Vibrant Center, in my I guess maybe my non-existential mind, as it were, I saw it as something without, as a place to go, and so I was, but then me knowing you, Kirk, I quickly realized, and certainly upon reading, that it wasn't a structure, but more so a centering, a place of being within. You mentioned at the outset, I was kind of drawn with the parenting piece. I almost didn't expect that, but I had at the very beginning developed a very deep appreciation for your dad and his fuming. He was fuming, and had to, but controlled this rage to after snatching you away from joining, I think it was 7 other kids from chasing after this person of color, this disabled kid of color, and it's just interesting that your dad was very angry. He was enraged, but he was able to hold that.
Yeah.
He was able to hold it and then redirect it with a few pats on your butt and use it as a teaching moment that could have been the pivotal point in your development. And a couple of questions came from that. I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is part of the Kirk Schneider constellation, as it were. You mentioned later on about the constellation. That was another question I had. What all that tells you, a constellation, but also too, when I read that scenario, a question came to me is, your dad did this, but where were the other parents? Where were the other dads?
Yeah.
And how if there were a way for your dad to have reached the other dads and say, hey, dude, you do this too. You do this too. How do parents, one single parent who has embraced this movement, the vibrant center, as it were, how would that parent reach another parent, and so on and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, there were no other dads in that scenario that I remember. Well, my dad got it to a great extent from his uncle, basically, who raised him. He's a very unique guy. And he was my great uncle, very much a humanist back in the early 20th century, too. He passed the bar. He was a lawyer, but he decided to become a mailman in Manhattan because he couldn't stand the hypocrisies of the time of law and wanted to live more of for him, more of a holistic life, I guess. Anyway, he talked with my dad a lot, as my dad talked with me a lot. They didn't pass up chances to explore really vital issues that were raised by things that went on locally or in the government or in things, let's say I was reading, movies, whatever. I think it kind of gets passed on. Maya Angelou makes this point too, of having what some people call surrogates in their lives. Sometimes they're parents, but often they're a caring relative, a neighbor, a mentor, who sort of pays it forward, and helps that person to pay it forward in their lives. And it's like a very beneficent contagion that could happen. How do we foster more of those spirits and souls in our world? This is the question Nisha also brought up. I have a few ideas about how to practically bring that more to our consciousness. I'm sure you all have ideas about that. I mean, you're trying in your own ways. But I do think it needs to be a more mass movement. And this is one of the reasons why I think we are so important at this stage of history. When I say we, I'm talking about the healers among us, those of us in the helping professions who have some background in dealing with contrasts and contradictions in our lives. It's really time to use it beyond the consulting room and to step out into social settings and make available what we have to offer. I think we should be the new leaders of a new consciousness that's so desperately needed. Not saying it's going to be a panacea, but I think it would be a hell of a lot better than what's going on now. So.
Emmy, I can see you nodding. Yes.
Yeah, maybe this is a good time for me to come in with a question I have, because I resonate so much with your writing and your work, Kirk, and we are in this fellowship together in the...
Oh, Emmy, we've just lost your audio, I think. Yeah.
Strange.
Oh, we got you back. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, shall I start again?
Oh, yes, please, Emmy. Yes.
Okay. So we are thinking alike in many ways, aren't we, Kirk? And we're both working alongside each other in the existential movement to do precisely that, to bring these ideas from our philosophy and our psychology and our psychotherapeutic practice into the wider world, and to give the wider public the benefit of that. But I am always acutely aware of the contradictions in that and the difficulties with that. And I think your title in some ways sums that up or gets to the core of my own doubts about it. So you're talking about the vibrant center, and you talk about Camus' radical moderation, and you're talking about, going to something that is about the middle, about the center. But that, in existential thought, has always been the very thing that we don't want. To go to that center has often been equated with kind of bourgeois comfort or the evasion of angst or of the shadow of the paradox. And one thing that we've learned in our psychotherapeutic practice is that it's never about making a compromise or going to a safe middle in a kind of Aristotelian way. It's not just about compromises, it's rather about holding the polarities and the oppositions and the conflict, and having the courage to be in that conflict and to know how to be with all sides of these contradictions and conflicts in society. And I think this is what seems so important, that we don't create a movement that leads to a kind of political moderation or a soft kind of compromise, or that dilutes what we are about, but that we stick with, I know this is what you want anyway, that we stick with the unsettling, anxiety-provoking nature of existential freedom. So I'd really love to hear your own doubts and views about that, and your own awareness of the dangers in this being taken over in some form or shape.
Well, I'm acutely aware of those dangers and very much resonate with what you're saying about them. But this is a reason that I call it a vibrant center. I want to emphasize the vibrancy of it, that it's not static, it's not complacent, it's not enabling, it's conscious, dynamic, etc. But there is a risk, yes, in coming out, squarely for a kind of a centrist view of moving in that kind of flat and constricted direction. I think the existential lineage has really gone back and forth about this idea of centering. Some advocating of real decentering, which has kind of led to a postmodern perspective to some degree at its extremes, and others, like Rollo May, who talks very powerfully about finding a center of strength within ourselves, can help us to better our human condition, our collective condition. So, of course, depends on the interpretation. But I also use the word vibrancy. I used to use fluid center, but and I still think that that's helpful. But I'm really trying to emphasize how this kind of centering can be enriching and can be vitalizing. Giving people some hope about it. I feel hopeful about that kind of working with contrasts and contradictions, the discovery orientation. We could call it life-enhancing anxiety too, but why not affirm the vibrant, enriching element of living more on the edge of wonder and discovery rather than terror and overwhelm? But I agree, we need to be, circumspect.
Yes, I see in the comments that Joseph Ritterko has said the vibrant fulcrum comes to mind. And that's interesting because a fulcrum is different to just a center, isn't it? That brings to mind something more along the lines of Jasper's idea of the loving struggle, where we stand in a safe place, but we argue things out. We push at each other. We don't just fall in to a blended kind of middle road where we all have to obey or toe the line. I think it is really, really important to hold on to the dynamism of that and the struggle that it will involve all the way through. It's going to be a dynamic, dialectical process, isn't it? And it won't be easy.
And this is why I call it a pivot point of choice and discernment.
Yeah.
I think that idea of pivot point, of being in a position to engage with one's whole body awareness, the panorama of possibilities before one, and then make the leap, right, into the decision, moral or ethical, as distinct from the fear-based, reactive, knee-jerk. But how to keep that struggle part in our awareness is
How
really...
to keep it alive, because that's the fire at the vibrant center, isn't it? And we must make sure, there's an art to making that fire, isn't there? You build it, you are very careful about it. You don't douse it, you don't make it so safe that there's no oxygen coming to it. This is really crucial, it seems to me, to our movement.
And yet we don't want to fall into the trap that Nietzsche called out to us with the death of God, quote unquote, or tradition of nihilism, and just all out chaos and anarchy. This is a postmodern challenge.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So thank you very much for bringing that out. And Alfred, I want to give you some time.
Kirk. I like the term vibrant center. I think it is very modern, very up to date, and it leaps directly to people. But I have a personal question first. When I hear vibrant center and I ask myself, where do I experience my vibrant center most intensively? It comes up to me that it is when I love. Is this a good understanding of the vibrant center, or is this a misleading way of understanding the vibrant center as you understand it?
I don't think it's misleading at all. I feel like it's maybe the core of the vibrant center.
in love, I'm so vibrant and I feel so centered. And I'm, of course, in attention and I'm longing and I'm suffering at the same time. And all these polarities are included. And so, Kirk, what I appreciate very much, what I really feel awe for your work and you as a person is your humanism. You are, as a person, an existential humanist, and this is you really work for bringing people together on an essential basis, on their truth, on the level of their true being, and to center people and to bring them, to lead them away from superficiality to their true self. And so this is absolutely something it speaks so much to me when I hear you and see you doing that and work for that. And this I really want to support, and I try to do the same.
Yes, you do.
But you have such a brilliant language and chosen words. I'm always impressed by this. And so this vibrant center, I think, could we say that it is personal and subjective? And here's a question I have. You bring up the thought that the vibrant center has rarely been tried in communal living, and I think it is the reason for brotherhood, for togetherness, but can it live in other ways than in dialogue, in encounter, in sharing, in openness? Is there a vibrant center in a communal life? Can there be, or is it strictly subjective, personal? And what is there a difference to be a person, to personhood?
Great questions. Well, I'd frame it another way. How can we support people to discover what really matters about living?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel like we're trying to get to here.
Right.
And that's love as well,
Sure.
What really matters about our personal lives and our collective lives, and that sense of brotherhood or sisterhood or communalism that you talk about is a place where people, I do feel that they feel that sense of mattering and of this is what life is about in its core. Now we have these forums like sports, and our festivals. And we had our July 4th celebration here. And these are sort of outward signs, too often hypocritical, but they do have elements of that kind of feeling of what brings us together, our common humanity. I definitely feel, well, for me, I'd say two places where I felt the height of that was in my own depth psychotherapy, where I was really supported to work with what really matters and to pursue that. And my love life, family, and my wife, and And I feel it in my community. I imagine that most of us have these, these sensibilities in different places. But that is the challenge of how to bring that into a more collective spirit. And I think by having more places where people can engage with the other in one-on-one engagement, not only group engagement, because a whole different thing happens, as most of you know, when we're one-on-one with people than when we're group to group. It's the humanizing, I think, shifts quite strongly. If we can develop more of these kinds of spaces in our society, pay more attention, again, to our inner lives, we'll move in that direction. This is our creative challenge, and this is our creative challenge as healers, I feel, coming up with these kinds of forums. And I know you're all doing that, which is wonderful. I feel that.
And how can the Vibrant Center resonate in a society, in a group? Must it be individually based, or is there something in common which you would call a Vibrant Center in a family or in a group?
I think it's both. I think it's I thou. It's back to Buber here. It's the holding of the sovereignty of the individual, the sacredness of the individual, the uniqueness of the person, and the meeting between people. And how we move toward that is some kind of democratic republic. I think that's one way, but it's more of an ideal. Certainly haven't gotten close to that. And I do advocate for a social democratic system. I don't think that it can happen very potently, let's say, within the current, free market capitalist system or the communist systems that we've seen. I think something like the Nordic systems that combine nuggets of truth from both sides is helpful. But how to do that with a very heterogeneous population and the diversity of the world, of course, is another question. We can take steps toward it. So I'm aware of time also,
Yes.
and I do want to leave time for our audience as well. I'm sorry to the panelists. If you had more questions, I know we can continue this maybe in another forum or other ways. But I think
we've got a question come in the chat, and then we might have more time for panel as well. Nisha, I know you prepared another question as well, so yes, holding that in mind. But
Nathaniel, did you have something very quick?
Well, I did. I just wanted to just look at the context. I mean, sometimes we look at this vibrancy or, based on context. And I somehow, just something that grabbed me when I was reading the book that kind of just stood out to me. And actually, I kind of took notion where there was a quote in there that said, living in the midst of war and violence makes attainment of awe most ludicrous. And that just kind of took me in a different direction, or I kind of took, I was just maybe challenged by that. And I don't know if that was the intent, but if war is all you know, and I remember when I was in war and I saw dilapidated war zones and children outside riding their bikes. They still continued to play. They still continued to have fun with missiles overhead. And so so this vibrancy is I like what Alfried was alluding to, this subjectivity of it, that you can have this and is not based entirely on something without. So
yeah, great point. And it's complex. It's complex, and I mean, think of Viktor Frankl also.
Mm-hmm.
How do we connect in that way? But my overall point is preventing that kind of violence, that kind of degradation. How do we prevent it? How do we limit it? How do we not get there? Because I do think at certain points, all bets are off. When you're directly threatened with physical harm, you're not going to be vibrating in this way. Not in this way.
But
Be
Kirk,
vibrating with a gun.
you're also very specific about ways in which we can maximize it. And one of the things that struck me is when you speak about children, because Nathaniel just brought that up. But what you're suggesting in chapter 2, if you permit me to read a sentence here that you have written, I think is very far reaching. So you're talking about challenging kids to think, to be more aware. And you say it's important to gradually present them with real life problems, such as what makes them happy, what makes them sad, what do they fear, what do they love, what makes a good community, what makes a miserable community, how do they handle frustration, what do they do when they feel put down or rejected, how do they repair broken relationships, when do they repair such relationships. These are amazing questions to talk about, not just with kids, but with adults as well. Most people haven't got a clue. So this is revolutionary stuff.
Well, but we got to start young, start with little kids.
It's about education.
Yes, and a much more holistic education. Let's not just teach kids to master the STEM disciplines. There's a wonder to that, and it's marvelous in so many ways, right? Again, for the external world, but let's pay more attention to the internal world of the arts and humanities, and how gutted they've been in the last 50 years, in particular, now in the last 5-10 years. So, I feel very strongly about that. More of these questions, great conversations, field trips, learning about your society, your community, public service, all of that needs to be incorporated. Okay.
Nisha, should we catch your question?
And then I know you want to leave it to the audience as well, but I have a follow-up on Alfred's question about love. I think that's so beautiful that love is at the heart of this vibrant, centered society, but then bringing it back to paradoxes, which I feel compelled to do. I'm thinking about all over the media, that couple that scaled the Empire State Building in New York and got engaged, I think it was last week, and then hung a giant banner across the New York City skyline that said, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace."
Wow.
And so paradoxes, right? Love and power. And again, Rollo May's he's written about the existential will to power. And I'm curious if you could speak to how almost like educating the next generation in awe-based consciousness can intervene with power. How would that work?
Power is to live a vital and enriching life. That's power, seems to me. A life of attunement to one's own being and the being of others, and again, to what deeply matters about this time and space that we have. That's real power, in my view. That's empowerment.
Thank you both. Let's catch this question from Peter in the chat. So thank you for this question. Kirk, thank you so much for sharing your inner distress on political and cultural waywardness in our world, here today and in your book. You mentioned about the adverse developments arising in the industrialization of some countries and wonder about First Nations people's sense of spirituality, which through colonization has been suppressed, even lost. What place can this have in your vibrant healing environment?
Well, I make the point that we turned away from indigenous spirituality and indigenous relationship to nature. Michel Foucault writes very eloquently about this in Madness and Civilization. At the very early points of the Enlightenment, which was enlightening in a number of ways, I don't want to discard it at all. But again, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, being so hyper-driven toward rationalizing and sanitizing and mechanizing our world, we have lost touch with indigenous healing sensibilities, resonance with nature, resonance with community, a slowing down of life, some more contemplative elements that have been lost. So I think actually we need to go back and receive, go back and partake of what we've turned away from in our, again, fear-based mentality of avoiding that which is radically other and different, that we weren't prepared to work with in a more presence-based way. So, yes, let's reincorporate the valuable elements of the indigenous cultures. And that, of course, takes a lot of exploration, inquiry, and meeting with those who embody those sensibilities.
Yeah. Thank you, Kirk. There was another question earlier asking, are we talking more of relationships than self-actualization? One of the great tensions, I think, in psychotherapy.
Yeah, I don't see vibrant centering as a bounded self notion. This is not about just the individual by any means. It has different valences in different cultures. It's like different angles on what it means to be centered. And this comes out in the biographies of these luminaries from Viktor Frankl to resilient luminaries, Viktor Frankl to Maya Angelou to Thich Nhat Hanh is one of them, Edward Said. Trying to think, it's hard to remember all the people, but Federico Lorca. I mean, I tried to choose people who were sort of exemplars of vibrant centeredness in their own cultures. And some had more of a collective sense of that centeredness and that vibrance, and some had more of an individualist sense. But they all shared, I believe, a dignifying of the human being. And they weren't dogmatic in their centeredness. They were relatively open, which is another pillar of it, openness to experience, and discerning, which comes out of that openness and realization. We're living with others and we have a finite life, and how are we going to live it? I think they all seriously faced that question. So it is on a spectrum, I would say.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you. I'm also noticing the question from Topher there, who is addressing something you're describing in the book about how fast the world is changing and technologically. You're also talking about AI, which is driving an incredible pace of change, and how we can kind of stay and fuel our vibrant center in such a fast pace of change.
Well, we develop more of these grassroots places, these sacred spaces for people to meet one another in more authentic ways. We need to really develop that muscle, so to speak, lest it atrophy. And I fear that's what's happening quite rapidly when kids aren't even exposed to those kinds of forums. Again, this is where the offering of in-depth relational psychotherapy is so vital in underserved communities in particular, and in served communities too. But highlighting the importance of having places for people to go where they can re-inhabit their fuller sense of life and of being and of what deeply matters. So I think we need a big focus on that.
Like that's a whole week of conversation in itself, isn't it? How we manage in this world that is moving so incredibly quickly.
And who's going to fund it? Who's going to support it? Right now, the moguls are not funding or supporting that. But people are asking, okay, how's it working for you? Is this great? Is this what we want? A robot-driven society, and where people are living in their silos and terribly lonely, terribly depressed, terribly addicted and anxious, and in war, in violence. Great. Yeah. So until people get that message, and I think they're getting it stronger and stronger, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But we can amplify it.
Yeah. Noticing we're coming into our last 10 minutes of our time together, and I wonder whether the panel might have some kind of closing reflections for you, Kirk, and then maybe we come to you also, Kirk, as we kind of draw our thoughts together. We're in such a vitally important conversation here. Would that work for the panel to kind of, there might be a reflection as we're coming to drawing to an end?
And if people have more questions or more input, I'm open to responding briefly. If you want to email me at kschneider56@gmail.com.
There is somebody who has had her hand up for a bit, John.
Roberta.
Yeah, Maria, could we unmute your microphone, bring you in just for, maybe a very brief question, so we're kind of keeping our eye on the time.
Thank you.
Maria, there we've got you. Yeah.
Hi, Kirk. I was impressed by your work. It is so many things all together. And so it is so inspiring, of course. And I think it's a vision to spread in every sector of society, and an attitude as well to develop in each human being, and at the same time a program, a wide program, also starting from school, starting from education and all that. And in this sense, for me, it's difficult to think in terms of large numbers, without thinking about about people who have to become leaders and at the same time supervisors. And so this made me think about the ideal state by Plato, Gallipoli, because I found there the same division, for example, division of classes, because you talk about this advisor group, and at the same time military as well, and then the workers, And so in this case, can we find a sort of connection with this archetype in some way? And you talk about social democracy, but at the same time, looking from this view, this archetypal view, we can see also aristocratic class of the wise, because the wise in some way should lead, are leading. Can you?
Yeah, this is.
I'm very curious about this. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great thorny question about. I mean, I think you're harking back to Plato's idea of a philosopher king, and the need for a certain, like you say, aristocratic, wise class, if you will, to take the lead. But I do have concerns about that. I think this should be more of a communal effort. I think we have learned to a great extent through our work in psychotherapy and in therapeutic processes about holding a group through more egalitarian and communal effort. And I think it would need to be more in that realm, but perhaps not without some leadership too, because that can be problematic if there isn't some leadership. I guess my hope is that people generally will become part of this aristocratic wisdom, or however you're terming it, that there'll be a general uplift of agreement and appreciation for life and for vitality in life. And that's why we do need to introduce these sensibilities, these ideas very early on to grow that. So that's the most I can say right now. It's part of a very long conversation, I'm sure.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for that response, Kirk. Just as we're coming to an end, Emmy, I could see you really nodding. I wondered if you had when we would have this a short reflection from each of the panel, and Emmy, whether we could come to you first.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes. Good. Well, I was very interested in that last intervention because I do think that out of all this, my concerns are sharpened all the time about how we do this and how we stand together to have an impact on society without becoming a totalitarian force of our own. And I was thinking, yes, you're right, Maria Roberta. We do need to dare to allow wisdom to come to the fore, and we do need to step onto the plate, and we do need to speak up about what we know. But one of the things we know is that we can be facilitative in our leadership instead of imposing things. and we can be democratic and invite people in rather than take over. So there are already guidelines in our own minds, but maybe we need to bring those out a little bit more to hold that paradox of, wanting to be egalitarian and wanting to be open-minded, but also wanting society to flourish in a new way and to bring that wisdom to the world and to bring out the fire of our vibrant center and to allow for conflicts and opposition in a peaceful way. All that kind of contradiction, we can hold it, but we need to keep talking about how we are going to do it, as well as that it is needed and why it is needed. So maybe implementation needs a lot more conversation in the future.
Absolutely. And Plato raised some great points, a warning of the dangers of both dictatorship and total democracy, of anarchy. But we've learned some things since Plato as well, haven't we? We have cultivated
I hope so.
Another consciousness. So I hope so too. Yeah, hope.
Nathaniel, is there anything you might want to say as we're coming to an end? Can we come to you
Kirk,
next?
this is so amazing. It is a masterpiece.
Oh,
And based on what Emmy just said and different one, Alfried, and certainly this work, if you decide to collaborate and develop the Vibrant Center, I would be very happy to be on the board or even a faculty member. So thank you.
What an offer that is. That's
Thank you. Love to have you on board. If that happens.
I would like to say...
Oh, Alfried.
I would like to say, where there is vibrancy, there is resonance. And to feel, to watch, to be aware of the resonance which I feel in myself. This is the world speaking to me on a phenomenological way. So resonance, I think, is a very practical access or component for the Vibrant Center. Do you agree, Kirk?
Very much agree. Yes. It's got resonance validity.
Wonderful. Nisha, can we come to you next? Yeah.
Kirk, I just want to give you kudos for redesigning parenting, redesigning education, redesigning workplaces, redesigning worship places, redesigning governance. It's, I think as humans, we forget that society is created by humans and it can be recreated by humans. And so I think this is such an act of empowerment, and I hope that it empowers everybody that reads it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I realize I'm out of my lane in all kinds of places as a therapist, psychologist. But I feel it's time for all of us, or as many of us as possible, to be out of our lanes on this matter.
And a kind of final word, Kirk, for you. I'd like to give you the last word. So
that's basically my final word is that we do have skills and abilities that are desperately needed right now. And I think we need to find ways of amplifying those. And it's through writing, through speaking, through existential movements, through these grassroots bridge-building dialogue movements. Do everything we can now, because at the very least, it'll be part of the record, of humanity. Somebody someday, with mechanical arms, maybe find a dusty old book or a video and go, oh, no, I think we missed something here.
We're keeping something alive, something so very, very precious alive. And And Kirk, congratulations on the book. And thank you for really a massive piece of work to keep that flame alive and to keep it lit. Yeah.
Well, thank you for providing this forum, John. Really, and similar forums. Really appreciate it.
Well, I know Sandra and I just feel so passionately about being able to open up these spaces, about our collaboration with the existential movement, so that wisdom is keeping in the world in all the various ways that we can all be doing that. So, yeah, congratulations, Kirk. A special thank you for this event, to the panel for being here and for being so generous, and to all of us as a group, and the energy that we can put in, all of us, into the world, sharing your book, Kirk, and keeping this flame alive too.